Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're jumping right into the story of one of the most uniquely charming, biologically fascinating, and unfortunately deeply imperiled reptiles living in the upper Midwest. We're talking about the Blanding's turtle. Named after an early American naturalist, Dr. William Blanding, this specific turtle has a wild fossil record dating back at least 9,000 years. But today, well, its survival is practically on a knife's edge. And to understand exactly why, we first need to look at just how incredible this animal truly is.
I mean, just look at how tiny and vulnerable these hatchlings are when they first start out. They emerge as these dark brown, quarter-sized little guys that are unexpectedly adorable but entirely defenseless. Relying on absolutely nothing but their sense of smell, they have to navigate this huge overland journey from their dry, sandy nests just to reach the relative safety of a wetland.
And once they actually make it to the water, they have this absolutely brilliant trick for surviving those brutal Minnesota winters. Because, lungs are pretty much useless when you're trapped under solid ice. So Blanding's turtles enter a state of brumation, which is basically a reptilian version of hibernation, right at the muddy bottom of deep marshes. To survive down there, they use specialized capillaries in their cloaca to absorb oxygen directly from the water. So in other words, yes, they quite literally breathe through their butts to survive until spring. So here's our word map for the explainer today. Number 1, meet the Blanding's turtle. 2, the Minnesota Survival Challenge. 3, everyday ways to help. And 4, for aspiring conservationists.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, Meet the Blanding's turtle. The dramatic transformation these animals undergo as they grow up is just incredible. On one hand, you have that dark, highly vulnerable little hatchling. But then, on the other, you get the adult. They feature this beautiful, highly domed black shell, speckled with yellow dots. And they have an absolute signature field mark, a brilliant, bright yellow chin and throat. Seriously, if you ever see a turtle stretching a bright yellow neck out of a duckweed-covered pond, you are definitely looking at a Blanding's.
Another super fascinating adaptation is their shell. Blanding's turtles are what we call semi-box turtles. The bottom of their shell, the plastron, actually has a functional hinge across the front third. By the time they hit about 5 years old, this hinge is fully mobile, acting like a literal evolutionary suit of armor. They can pull the front edge of their lower shell tightly against their top shell to box themselves in and completely protect their head from predators.
So here's the crucial takeaway. If they manage to survive those highly vulnerable early years and grow into that suit of armor, these turtles have an astonishingly long lifespan. We are talking about an animal capable of living and reproducing for over 80 years in the wild. In fact, researchers over in Michigan documented an 84-year-old female who was still actively laying a clutch of eggs every single year.
Adding to all that unique biology, their gender is entirely determined by the temperature of their nest during the 75 to 110 days of incubation. Eggs that incubate in cooler temperatures, say below 77 degrees Fahrenheit, will produce almost exclusively males. But if that nest is baking in the summer sun at temperatures above 86 degrees, you're going to get primarily female hatchlings. It's an incredibly delicate environmental balance.
Let's move on to Section 2. The Minnesota Survival Challenge.
Despite those heavily armored adult shells and incredible lifespans, these turtles are facing a severe crisis right now, particularly in Minnesota, where they are officially state-listed as a threatened species. But why are they so threatened? Well, their ancient survival strategy relies on biological bed hedging, basically counting on a few adults living forever to offset the high mortality rate of babies. And that strategy is completely incompatible with our modern, human-altered landscape. Females will travel up to 2 miles overland just to find perfect sandy nesting sites. During those massive migrations, they're forced to cross busy roads, navigate drained wetlands, and dodge heavy agricultural machinery. Combine that with poachers illegally collecting them for the pet trade and a warming climate drying out their wetlands, and the deck is heavily stacked against them.
The stark contrast between adult survivorship and nest vulnerability is really the absolute heart of the problem here. Adult survivorship is exceptionally high when they're left alone in nature, but the reality for the nests? It's pretty grim. Raccoons, skunks, foxes, and even chipmunks absolutely decimate the eggs and hatchlings. Predators destroy over 90% of Blanding's turtle nests. So with adults being killed by cars and 90% of the babies getting eaten, local populations are plummeting simply because there's virtually no new juvenile recruitment.
And this is exactly why Minnesota agencies are so desperately trying to raise public awareness. They distribute these brilliantly simple caution flyers in high-risk areas to alert contractors and homeowners to keep an eye out for these slow-moving travelers. Because think about it. When a species takes 12 to 20 years just to reach sexual maturity, the loss of even a single adult female to a vehicle or a bulldozer is a devastating blow to the entire local population.
Which brings us to Section 3, Everyday Ways to Help. Okay, let's pivot away from the doom and gloom and talk solutions. What can we actually do? Well, if you see a Blanding's turtle crossing the road, you can literally save its life by following a very strict protocol. First, and most importantly, only help if it is safe for you to be in the roadway. Second, pick the turtle up by hand and move it in the exact direction it was already traveling, because if you put it back where it started, it's just going to turn around and try to cross again. Third, never put the turtle in a container or into your car. Since they are a threatened species, this can look exactly like illegal poaching to law enforcement. Finally, snap a quick picture and report your sighting to the Minnesota DNR so they can map the population.
But beyond the roads, your own backyard can actually be a vital sanctuary. If a turtle nests in your yard, consider yourself lucky and leave it completely undisturbed. Keep your dogs and cats leashed during nesting season. You can also help by cleaning up neighborhood litter, because trash attracts the raccoons and skunks that ravage those nests. If you live on the water, try to leave a natural 50-foot vegetated buffer along your shoreline to filter out pollution. And it definitely bears repeating, do not take these beautiful turtles home as pets. It is strictly illegal.
Let's wrap up with Section 4, for aspiring conservationists.
Now, for those of you watching who are looking to dedicate your careers or your studies to saving wildlife, let's look at the professional multi-agency efforts currently underway. Wildlife ecologists and partners, like the Minnesota Zoo, are actively performing something called head starting. It's this brilliant timeline of intervention. During the summer, biologists go out and collect eggs from highly vulnerable nests. They hatch them safely in captivity in the fall. Then, the turtles spend a full year being reared at the zoo, which allows them to grow rapidly. The next year, they're released back into the wild. This gives the hatchlings a critical size advantage, making them far less susceptible to all those hungry predators we talked about earlier.
But modern conservation isn't just about rearing hatchlings. It relies heavily on high-tech solutions too. Biologists at places like Camp Ripley are conducting genetic surveillance to figure out the effective population size, meaning they want to know exactly how many adults are successfully passing on their genes. They're tracking habitat use by supergluing tiny GPS and radio telemetry transmitters right to the turtle shells. Vets are conducting baseline disease monitoring to protect wild populations from emerging threats like rhinovirus and herpes virus. And civil engineers are even getting in on the action, designing and testing small animal exclusion fencing along highways to physically block the turtles from wandering into traffic.
Ultimately, saving the Blanding's turtle is going to require a permanent, landscape-level commitment to our natural spaces. They absolutely need a mosaic of healthy wetlands and safe, sandy uplands to survive. So the big question is, will we prioritize this habitat enough to ensure this 80-year-old bright yellow-chinned traveler survives its next journey? It really leaves us all to wonder exactly what part we're going to choose to play in their ongoing survival story. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next explainer.